Sampling methods. Collecting data is an important part of a statistical study. There are many resources for obtaining data which already exist. Many federal agencies regularly collect data which is available to the public. For example, there is data collected and available at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Internal Revenue Service, Department of Justice, General Social Survey, and another source of data is the census. A census is a list of all individuals in a population along with certain characteristics of each individual. The U.S. conducts a census every 10 years. The first census was conducted in 1790 under the direction of Thomas Jefferson. Did you know that it is actually a constitutional mandate that a census be conducted every 10 years? Even though in the year 2010 it cost approximately $5.4 billion to perform the census. Why is the U.S. Census so important that it would be a constitutional mandate? Well, the results of the census are used to determine the number of representatives in the House of Representatives for each state, congressional district, and the distribution of funds for government programs like Medicaid. Constructions of schools and roads, for example, are also part of that. Now, in a census, the idea is that every member of the population is actually surveyed. Do you think there would be any flaws in that? Do you think it would be possible to survey every member of the population? Well, there are some members who don't turn the census in, so then they send somebody and they come knocking on your door. Well, there are some people that they can't speak English, so they don't know how to respond to the census, or they ignore the people who come to the door. There are homeless people. They don't have an address or a door for people to come to. So they do the best job they can of gathering the census, but sometimes it's not always possible to do that. When we're talking about a census in a statistical study, sometimes it's not always possible to survey the entire population. For example, suppose I wanted to collect data on the measurements of the parts coming off of an assembly line. Well, if I used every single part coming off the assembly line, then I'm going to have a hard time producing enough of them to sell because I'm going to be spending all my time measuring them. So it's not always economically feasible or practical to use a census. So what we'll do is we'll use a sample. Okay, there are 4 different sampling methods that we will focus on, or we're going to look at. And when it comes down to it through the rest of the course, we're actually going to use random sampling for our sampling method. Okay, so simple random sampling, and we'll later just call it random sampling, stratified sampling, systematic sampling, cluster sampling, and we'll also, for good measure, throw in convenience sampling, which is a method that we will never use. Okay, so random sampling is the process of using chance to select individuals from a population to be included in the sample. For example, if I took the name of every brand new student at Gaston College this semester and I put their names in a hat and I drew out 20 of the names, that would be a random sample. Now, we generally don't go through the process of actually writing their names and putting them in a hat. We may have them in a numbered list and use a random number table or a random number generator on a calculator or in Excel or some other type of computer program. So for the results of a survey to be reliable, though, the characteristics of the individuals in the sample, no matter how we collect that sample, must be representative of the characteristics of the individuals in the population. Okay, so in a random sample, a sample of size n from the population of size n, so this is a lowercase for the sample size, uppercase for the population size, is obtained through simple random sampling. If every possible sample of size n has an equally likely chance of occurring, the sample is called a simple random sample. Now, because you hear the words random sample doesn't necessarily mean that we're dealing with a random sample. Okay, so let's move on and look at some others and I'll explain that. A stratified sample is obtained by separating the population into non-overlapping groups called strata and then obtaining a simple random sample from each of the stratum. The individuals within each stratum should be homogeneous or similar in some way. For example, the strata may be based on gender, Okay, male, female, may be based on race, may be based on political affiliation, may be based on economics. It could be based on your zip code. It could be based on the bank branch that you go to. It just depends on what's being studied. So that population is divided into groups. So for example, here I have 8 groups, and then you take a simple random sample. Let's say I chose 5 from each of the 8 groups for a sample size of 40. So my sample size is 40, and I'm going to choose 5 from each of the groups. So the population is divided into strata, which we call groups. Then a simple random sample is collected from each of the groups. So in this situation, we're going to take sum from all. Okay, sum members from all groups, so that you know every layer or every strata, every group is represented in the sample. All right, a systematic sample is obtained by selecting every kth individual from the population. The first individual selected corresponds to a random number between 1 and k. So if I'm going to select every 8th part off the assembly line is measured for tolerances. So I'm going to randomly select a number between 1 and 8, and that's where I'm going to start. Let's say I selected number 5. Well, then I'm going to choose number 5, and then I'm going to choose the next one. I'm going to choose the 8th one after that, and then the 8th one after that, and then the 8th one after that. Okay? Every third person from a list of all incoming freshmen is selected to complete a survey about online orientation. So I'll randomly select a number between 1 and 3, and then I will start at that number, and then after that number, every third person will be selected to complete that survey. Okay, so this is a big key here when you're looking for systematic sampling. Cluster sampling is very similar to stratified sampling, but I want you to pay attention to the big difference here. These are the two that are hardest to distinguish between. A cluster sampling is obtained by selecting all individuals within a randomly selected collection or group of individuals. So again, the population is divided into clusters or groups. So I have my 8 groups here again. Several of the groups are randomly selected. So if I number off my groups, then I randomly selected 3 groups, and I was given groups 1, 3, and 4. Then every member of those 3 groups are selected to form the sample. Okay, so in this situation, all are surveyed from some of the group. All members of the group are surveyed, but only some of the groups are surveyed. Whereas in stratified sampling, some members from all of the groups are surveyed. Okay. Convenience sampling, I don't think I spelled that right earlier, is a sample in which the individuals are easily obtained and not based on randomness. This is not very going to give you a very good representation of the population. For example, if I just surveyed all the members of the class, okay, that would not give me a good representation necessarily of the population. There's a great picture in your textbook that sort of distinguishes between the 4 common types of sampling. Simple random sampling, here we've got them numbered off 1 through 9, it looks like, and then we randomly select a few of them. In stratified sampling, you first break the population into groups, so they were broken into 2 groups, and then I chose some out of each group. Okay. In systematic sampling, the group was numbered off, the population was numbered off. You selected a number to begin with, and then in this situation you selected 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So every third person was selected. In cluster sampling, here we've got our entire population. It was divided into 6 clusters. All the members in the first cluster were selected to be surveyed, and all the members in this cluster were selected to be surveyed. Okay, you select those by a simple random sample. Okay, so you can't just see the words simple random sample and decide that that's the type of sampling method it is. Okay, randomness is used in all of the sampling methods. All right, identify the type of sampling used. So out of these four basics, let's see if we can recognize when we're using which type. To determine the prevalence of human growth hormone, HGH, use among high school varsity baseball players, the State Athletic Commission randomly selects 50 high schools. All members of the selected high school's varsity baseball team are tested for HGH. Okay, so if we look at this, the groups would be the high schools that are in the different leagues. And then once they got the high schools that they selected, they ended up then surveying every member in that on that team. Okay, so all members were selected. After they randomly selected 50, all members in that group then were used. So this is cluster. Number 2, a member of Congress wishes to determine her constituency's opinion regarding estate taxes. She divides her constituencies into 3 income classes: low-income households, middle-income households, and upper-income households. She then takes a simple random sample of households from each of the income classes. This would be stratified. Okay, you're using groups and you're taking some out of each group. A radio station asks its listeners to call in their opinion regarding the use of the U.S. forces in peacekeeping missions. This would be a convenience sample. And when this happens, we often say that this is self-selected survey. Okay, these people are going to have to volunteer or self-select to be in this survey. So typically when that happens, there are people that are very opinionated one way or the other. A farmer divides his orchard into 50 subsections, randomly selects 4 and samples all the trees within the 4 subsections of the to approximate the yield of his orchard. So this would be cluster. A college official divides the student population into 5 classes: freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, graduate students. The official takes a simple random sample from each of the classes and asks the members' opinion regarding student services. So this would be stratified. The president of a guest lecture series at a university stands outside the auditorium before the lecture begins and hands every 5th person who arrives, beginning with the 3rd, a speaker evaluation survey to be completed and returned at the end of the program. This would be systematic. Okay. 24 Hour Fitness wants to administer a satisfaction survey to its current members. Using its membership roster, the club randomly selects 40 club members and asks them about their level of satisfaction with the club. This would be a simple random sample. You're not dividing the members into groups or anything like that. This is just a simple random sample. So the goal of the sampling methods section here is that you recognize the different types of sampling methods that are being used in a given situation.